wanna say that yours is the best love that I've ever had. And I just wanna say that I think it's only fair that we give it back. I love you. I love you. Just to show you.
Let's, because I definitely want to touch on that. Introduce who you are. You are Nicolas J. Scott.
Nicolas J. Scott.
What does the J stand for?
The J stands for Joseph.
I love that.
All the men in my family were named Joseph except for me. I just got a middle J. Yeah.
So cinematographer, documentary filmmaker, musician, and pastor.
In training, apparently. Yeah.
I met you. Can't remember where I met you. I know it was at an event, I believe.
It might have been at All Nations.
Was it All? Yes.
It was at All Nations.
That's
where I got saved.
Right. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
We met at church, and I don't think we really talked that much at church, but I saw you a lot outside of church. And one thing I could say is that you are an extremely integral man, and I picked that up from you without even having too many conversations with you. I'm like, this man he's legit for sure. Like I can tell, like you're not, I almost said like the others, but you're not common. Essentially, is what I'm trying to say. I picked it up and I said, yes, he's a very genuine man. And I watched you for a while. I'm like, he's really doing this. Like he's really living the life. And of course, I don't know everything, and I'm sure that there's like places that you would want to grow in. But the fact that you are pursuing salvation and pursuing the sanctity of it, the sanctity of relationship with God, and giving the roadmap for it with your Bible studies, making it applicable to people in the studies. I did join one, and I was like, this is definitely, because I'm used to, I love being around old people when it comes to scriptural things, because it's like there's wiggle room for that much opinion, and that's usually what you find sometimes in these like younger Bible studies. I was like, this is not that. This is a Bible-based Bible study that you really can be fed in, and I appreciated that for sure.
I really appreciate everything that you just said. I'm like, wow, that's everything that you just said is like really high praise to me. So I really appreciate that. I'm honored to even fit that like description. Because I think one of my biggest struggles with my faith has been, I think, like I have absolutely fallen short in a few different areas, like since the time I got saved. Like I got saved, and then there was like, this entire period of time between me getting saved and even like now, like today, like I'm still working on things. I have like a lot of pride, you know what I mean? I'm blessed that I'm about to see 2 years of sobriety, which is pretty cool. But I've had a lot of things in terms of like dating, sex, like things that I've really had to like work through from the time that I got saved. Because I don't know, I think there's a lot of us who are believers who, our faith is kind of like the Bible has a lot of this said in it, right? Where Paul is talking about the church is like, the idea of Christianity, not only to like the outside world, but also to the fellow believer is a practice of like being demonstrated by people who we look up to, or people who are in our families, who are in our vicinity, in our community. And so I definitely fell a little bit prey. I wouldn't say prey, but casual Christianity, casual faith, a lot of that I think is very common. And it's not well, I would say it's not anything, but it's definitely something that's hard to, when you realize like, oh, it's serious for a reason, right? It is like the seriousness of like your spiritual of your soul and all of these different things for a good reason. And it's very easy to like, it can be very easy to like really like flirt with disaster and play with fire and do all these different things that just are not good for us as humans, as Christians, as members of communities of any kind of community. You know what I mean? There's a lot of principles for any kind of community that can be taken from the Bible too. But so I really appreciate that. I think even when I was doing the Bible study, I'm gonna give you some background. My father is a pastor, but my father didn't raise me.
Right.
And I dealt with, and still do to this day, like a lot of like anger and kind of like frustration with like, I wish, you know, in a lot of ways, I wish that like the path that I'm going into now, I wish it was like my dad that was teaching me the things, as opposed to like these guys that I kind of just met a couple years ago. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I knew that when I started it, and I started to see how many people were coming through that didn't necessarily know a lot about the Bible, I needed to meet them where they were at, but also like where I was at, which was kind of really just starting to understand the faith and understand the gospel, but also understand this thing that I've heard pastors say like, when you read the Bible, you're also bringing your own experience to it. You know what I mean? And you're kind of reading it through the lens of what you're going through and what you've been through. But I also think in a lot of ways, people are experiencing the concept of God and the concept of Christianity through the lens that they have already been through. And so a lot of the people who were in the Bible study, and I don't know if this was particularly the one that you were present for, but there were people that came to the Bible study that we would have a lot of our conversations would be why they weren't Christians. You know what I mean? Like, where's everybody at in their faith journey? Like, if you're here, if you're new here, like, can you kind of describe what brought you here? And you know what I mean? And a lot of times they'd be like, well, I'm a little bit interested that you, of all people, sort of started a Bible study. But then they wind up telling stories about how either, you know, their parents or family or grandparent, you know what I mean? These people were really serious, claimed to be really serious believers, but didn't set a good example for all the things that you would hope biblically or expect biblically for somebody to be. So, and those things, people are very sensitive, so they can get driven away from faith. With one like negative interaction can be enough to drive somebody away for the rest of their life. And when I started figuring that out, I was like, okay, I probably should be as responsible as I could be with this, you know?
And I think that is something even that a lot of pastors have not reconciled, because like you mentioned, it could be a pride thing, and it could be a thing of basically them saying, well, I've gotten to this point with my knowledge, and I've gotten to this point studying and reading and interpreting, and God has elevated me to this point, so I know what I'm talking about. However, you forget you're dealing with sheep, or you're dealing with people, you're dealing with hearts, you're dealing with stories, you're dealing with hurt, trauma, all of that. And when you approach it haphazardly, or you approach it really heady or prideful, you've done more damage than you think. And it's like, you have to meet people where they are and allow God to bring them where you think they should go, where you're trying to get them to go. Like, that's not a responsibility for you. Your responsibility is to present. Pull or yank somebody to where you present. And if the Bible is as true as you say, if the Word of God is as true as you say, it'll do the work. It'll do the penetration to the heart like it did for you. Like, that's what I always tell people. Think about when you got saved. How you just felt this revolutionary experience. It sometimes it don't take much. It takes a service, a conversation. It can be the same
Yeah, and even to like comment on that, like even to say like that you and I met at All Nations.
Mhm.
All Nations was such a different church experience than what I had grown up with, because I grew up Catholic, and mind you, like my family's like Irish Italian. So like my church experience was very different from what was going on at All Nations. Like we don't have like the music and the like. It's not a joyous like big experience the way that like an experience like All Nations is,
Mhm.
where it's like the music and the band and it's just like this. It's so powerful in a different way. And not to say that I can't appreciate like a Catholic service,
Right.
now as an adult and be like, I can see why people gravitate towards this for their own reasons. But
Absolutely.
I think in a lot of ways, it's not necessarily the package that it comes in, except that for people who already have an idea of what it is in their mind and it's a negative one, that something different that they're not expecting is sometimes just the best way to, you know what I mean, to kind of like, because if they have this like cynical idea in their head of like, oh, church is like this and people are like this and the community is like this and Jesus is like this and the Bible is like this, but then you see it in a different environment having a different effect or just being interacted with differently, then it's like all those things in your mind kind of go away and you really are a little bit more vulnerable to like hearing the word.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Hearing a Catholic priest preach the word as opposed to like hearing like, do you remember Jamal?
Yeah.
Yeah, like when Jamal would preach, man, like I would love when Jamal would preach, like, and so hearing the way that like somebody like Jamal would preach, or like some of the other people that would preach at All Nations versus like the stuff I grew up with, was just, it was so different, and it really made it. I think it made it possible for me to not have my previous old ideas of church or like Christianity in the front of my mind while I was listening,
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of also multi-generational churches, because you sometimes get to a point with your older churches, like you hit a cap and it's like not saying you've exhausted God, but it's sometimes with those multi-generational churches, you have different minds working in different spaces, different eras. So it's like you can think a little further than certain people and figure out ways on how to make everyone feel included or make sure everyone can get something when it comes to like the preaching, like the young preachers.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna get it right, but it definitely it helps when you have that little edge of youth, because it's like, okay, how can I appeal to these people, let them know like the gospel hasn't dried up. Like it may be old, but it ain't dried up and it has not exhausted itself. So for sure, I'm so glad you had that experience. Now I do have first question for you.
Okay.
How do you personally reconcile your faith with your creative work in fields like cinematography and music production?
So this is gonna be a long answer. I just hope that's okay. I'm still in the process of reconciliation. It has taken a lot. I've been a musician my whole life. Been a photographer for about half my life. So like cinematography and like video, like filmmaking are pretty new, but in a lot of ways, they follow the same pattern of trying to use my creativity to impress people. And actually like in an unhealthy way that I've followed for a lot of years of my life. Really until, I mean, I'm still working on like getting out of that habit because it is definitely something that I deal with and like struggle with. And in a lot of ways, the reconciliation process has been like getting to a place of willingness to like to serve, to use those talents to serve. And if I can't use them to serve, then to lay them down, at least for the time being, and even like, making music. I think the last full song Like I recorded a song over the summer that was just like this cool little like it was like a vibe. It was like I was, you know, it's like a song, it's in Spanish. It's like it's about a girl and stuff like that. And it really like it just didn't. You know, I used to make music that was like I used to make R&B and like stuff like that. It was like I made a lot of cool music, you know. And I got to the point where I'm like, this is not. It's not. It's neither feeding nor drawing from my spirit
Yeah.
anymore. Until I made my first like worship song. It was a song about getting baptized that I made called "The Long Way Home." So it's on YouTube. I want to. It's a demo version. It's on YouTube, but making that song, I had a really profound encounter with God while I was making that song. It was like very shortly after I got baptized. But I, you know, kind of like realizing that not everybody, I think, has the same process of creativity,
Right.
or even like the same reasons behind pursuing their creativity. So I can't speak for anybody else, but I know that for me, for a long time, it was very much to try and get validation from the world. You know what I mean? To get validation from people, to try and impress people, and ultimately to make people feel like I was worth being appreciated, being seen, being loved or admired or whatever. But I operated in that way for so long that even like now, being in a place where the majority of the work that I'm doing is for the church, it's for the church and for like people who are a part of the church. So a lot of the freelance stuff that I'm doing now is really just people who I know through the community of my church.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm really committing, I think, just even being part of the Bible college runs through the church. So it's like I can also do these kind of like creative things in conjunction with the church, and I'm getting like, you know, credit and stuff like that for being able to do that, which is, I think, really dope because I'm still trying to figure out how to reconcile these things. But I know that where I'm at right now, a lot of it has been like, you know, the band that I started last year, like we just had a conversation about me transitioning out of the band, like in this next season, as I'm like taking Bible college more seriously and really trying to be faithful and say that, like, you know, I know God gave me these gifts for a reason, but I need to stop using them for my own reasons, like really just doing stuff because I can or because I'm talented enough to do them, and really like starting things from a place of prayer, which has been something that's been hard for me because I thought that just because I could do something, it was good enough reason to do it. And I do think that there's spiritual merit to that, even if we talk about like the parable of the talents, right? That's like, if you are given a talent, like do something with it, like period. You know what I mean? But I think there's also the idea of like, well, if you know, like once you've been called to work on behalf of the kingdom of God, that you're not really given the privilege or the option of not doing that.
Yeah.
Like now, once you know, like if you were ignorant to it, that would be one thing. If you didn't know and were operating outside of what would, you know, be considered a biblical way of glorifying God, it's one thing if you don't know, but once you know, you're not really allowed to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And then it becomes an act of defiance. And I'm really trying to stay away from doing that because I feel like I get myself in a lot of trouble, you know.
Because prayer is paramount to the believer. Like it's our vehicle to get from one place or one stage to another. And the Bible tells us to pray without ceasing. So praying about everything is literally everything.
Yeah. And I think not trying to give, the other thing too is, right, it's like, even I think it might be Hosea. Jesus references it, but I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Is basically like I want you to do things properly from the way that that you're supposed to do them, rather than doing the wrong thing and trying to make it right on the back end.
Absolutely.
So be like, I did all this because I felt like it, but on the back end, let me double my tithe on the back end, right?
And that's sin. that's definitely sin.
Yeah, and there's a few examples of that throughout the Bible, but I definitely, and there's a few examples of that in my own life that I'm really in the process of like really trying to like rectify, and that's like kind of the process of reconciliation is also like recognizing like where am I doing that, how am I doing that, how can I stop doing that. And so a lot of it is just being like, okay, even if it's temporary, let's stop and then like start from a place of prayer, rather than be like, well, I can pray in the middle of it, even though when it started it didn't have anything to do with God. But I can pray in the middle of it, and I can try and work God into it in the middle of it happening.
Yeah.
So
how can not switching gears, but moving to a different portion, how can the church better support Christians working in these secular fields, in your opinion? Like, how can believers in general, not even just specifically talking about the church, how can believers in general support those of us who work in these secular fields, but still uphold a Christian standard, or a standard, or the standard?
Yeah.
Is there a Christian standard? But yes.
That's a great question. I think it kind of depends on a case-by-case basis, right? Like, the church is not going to support people that are operating in a secular field in a way that I think doesn't accurately depict the gospel.
Right.
So it wouldn't make sense, you know what I mean? It wouldn't make sense, like, just because this person is a member of the church, that we support them in the way that they might be asking for. In the sense of like a child is not necessarily equipped to raise itself. So even though the kid wants soda, you'd be like, no, like you need water and vegetables.
Right.
You know what I mean? So even though I know you want so, like I could alleviate this for you. Like I know you want to be more successful in more of these things, but if it's not necessarily something that we look at as being good for you, it would be and not even necessarily to say the church as an institution, but even just as believers, you know what I mean? Because I'm not like in a staff or like leadership. I mean, I'm stepping into these things like over time, but I'm not a pastor. I'm not getting up on stage and preaching. I'm not, I'm doing my part at like as diligently as I can, but I'm not in a position really to like tell anybody what to do, outside of saying like, if it's somebody I know and I see them operating in a way that I'm like, hey, I don't necessarily know if this is healthy or if this is something that I feel like is aligned with your beliefs,
right,
or the way that you're going about it. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who I've been working with for a really long time, who also was the person who brought me back to my faith like a few years ago. Who's a musician, artist, rapper, really dope, but is also, wants success in the industry, but doesn't want to like do things that are, against their faith, and that's real. But I think there's a process. The process to aligning those things is putting the faith first, right? And not trying to like work it in to right?
Yeah.
Being like, and that's not to say that people can't change or shift or change directions, even if they have gotten a certain amount of progress by being one way. But that being said, it's like, well, how can the church support creative people in secular fields? Did you say creative or you said just secular?
And secular fields.
Okay.
Do you know what my answer was? Because I try to answer these questions.
Okay. Well, what's your answer? I'm interested.
My answer was prayer. I feel like a lot of the time, the first response is jumping to judgment. But I believe if we believe what the Bible actually says about us going into the world and Christian gospel compelling the people to come, we should be covering those people in prayer instead of giving our opinion about stuff that we most of the time aren't even qualified to do in the church as well as outside of the church. So it's like your first response should be prayer. If someone is singing in a lounge or a club or something, my response is, Lord, cover them, let your light shine through them, let somebody hear something that they've never heard before that would compel them to come. And I don't believe God is this God that has to be conformed to the church.
That's real. I think that my answer was actually terrible compared to that one.
No, it was a great answer.
I feel like that was like that is absolutely the go-to. I think I always and this is probably something that I have to work on. I think I'm always looking for, or I'm just in the habit of always looking for like a practical answer to everything, and that's not always necessarily the most faithful thing to do, even though it's like you can find ways to outwork your faith practically. Yeah, I mean, I agree for sure. I think I did have to have that conversation with this artist yesterday, where it was like, are you more concerned with what the world thinks of you than whether or not you're like just operating in the gratitude to God for your gift?
Yeah.
And I think that's a difficult thing for everybody has like a different, I think, answer to that question a little bit. But I do think that there are a lot of people who are very absorbed mentally and emotionally and even spiritually by wanting that validation from people, you know? And I always say that, and I always like, I don't want to project. Like, I definitely put my hand up and be like, and I'm a huge example of that for sure. Like, that's what I said before, right? Like, I've definitely been a huge example of that. And so, like, not to project, but like, it definitely does make it easier for me to see when that's happening, and to just like talk to people about it. I think grace, prayer. I think grace 1,000%. Is so important because you're correct that like nobody has the right to judge anybody, but we all have the obligation to help one another.
Absolutely.
In the faith,
there's a standard. There's absolutely a standard. My only issue is when people make up their own standards to impose on other people, because I don't need your standard if it's not God's standard. If I'm wrong, like this is my thing. This is what people may fight me for. If I'm wrong, okay, I'm wrong. But if your opinion of why I'm wrong is not biblical, then we're both wrong. We're both wrong, and we're both just being disobedient. I feel like the help is when you come saying, okay, if you are going to say something, okay, well, what does the Bible say? What is going on? Like, what does the Bible say? Not what you feel, or how you feel, or because your feelings are valid to you, but they still may be leading me astray. If I listen.
Do you have like an example? Like, can you provide an
Absolutely.
example there?
So, for instance,
There's construction happening outside my apartment. I don't know if you can hear it.
I don't know, I hear the beat, but it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. And I'm probably gonna forego the rest of these questions, but I feel like we're doing good on our own. Say for instance, you have, similar to what you said, an artist, someone who is a not an R&B artist, but someone who's an inspiration.
Is this a hypothetical?
It's hypothetical.
I know, an example.
Huh?
An example, not a hypothetical example. I'm talking about like an example from like real life.
Okay, repeat your question.
It was everything that you said. You're talking about when people have opinions that are not rooted biblically.
Oh, church people all the time. Christians have this thing where they have their life experience and something may have worked for them, and it may have been fruitful for them, and how the way they live their life that may not be biblical or applicable to my life at all, and it may lead me down a road of disobedience to God, because people also forget God speaks to his people, not just one person. So if God has told me to do something that may not align with your opinion for my life or your opinion for the situation, I'm going to do it in obedience to God and not obedience to your preference or how you feel like it should be packaged, how you feel like it should look. Some people judge preachers for the way that they preach, the way that they explain, but if someone is set in the face of God and he's given them his word to convey to you, for you to be fed, and your preference and opinion is getting in the way, and you pushing it on me, and if I listen to you, now I'm in sin because I'm trying to cater to what the listener is trying to hear instead of what God is telling me to give.
I feel that. I think one of the things that I always stressed in Bible study, and it's something that I've observed a lot, and maybe you can attest to this. It sounds like it's kind of like the experience that you have. I think people are able to relate a lot more when they realize that they're being communicated with from a place of empathy. So not as much like, hey, you're not supposed to be doing this, but like, let me tell you about a time when I was in your shoes.
Yeah.
And how, I just, not even to say like you're going down the wrong path, but like, let me just tell you my experience. And if it resonates, then like, let's have an even deeper conversation after that. And one of the things, I guess, the way that I've like kind of put it is that like in a lot of ways as Christians, a lot of us gravitate to sermons, but not necessarily testimonies, right? It's like you want to stand on the soapbox and preach, but it's not necessarily rooted in that like personal, like, let me just tell you where I'm at. And I think, and in Bible study, that was kind of one of my main rules was, we're going through the gospel, and I'm trying to write the most intense and difficult discussion questions that I possibly can. Not like over like invasive, but one of the examples that I used was the when Jesus goes up to the lame man with the mat, and the first thing he says is not like, what happened to you?
Yeah.
Your sins are forgiven. And I thought that was interesting. I'm like, the first thing that you said, this man can't walk. Like, the first thing you need to know is that you're forgiven. And then that leads to him being able to walk, right?
Yeah.
And so the discussion question that I had offered was, when was a time that lack of forgiveness stood in the way of you moving on with your life?
Absolutely.
And none of the hands went up. So I was like, all right, I'll share. Let me go first. So I was like, I started talking about, stuff with my dad, like some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier. Stuff with my parents in general, that, has been a pretty important thing for me to like work through in my walk. But, being able to share that, one, after I shared, there were a bunch more people who were able to share. But then too, the other thing that I wanted to counsel people on was really like to avoid these abstract versions of your story, and to say like, hey, I appreciate people wanting to share, but if you're not prepared to share something in the first person, if you're not prepared to share in the first person, then I'm going to ask that you just listen.
Ooh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was really effective too, because it was like not everybody was ready to share. And some of the people that did wind up sharing wound up encountering, I think, a lot of breakthrough in some of those moments. That was really powerful. And they wound up telling about experiences that it was clear that they needed to talk about, as opposed to jumping into this like, I know this is sort of like a knee-jerk reaction for a lot of Christians, but like, just like like the second and third person, like when you do this, God's gonna do this. When you're here, God's gonna do it. How come you're doing this and this? It's like, and I think one of the things that I wound up, and I thought about this last night, is like a lot of, okay, a lot of preaching is done with a pointed finger instead of a raised hand.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the word that I like. Oh, okay. A lot of preaching is done with a pointed finger instead of a raised hand.
That's going to be the clip for the introduction.
That's going to be the clip? Okay.
Yeah.
And I definitely have always wanted to communicate what I'm going through, what I've been through, and what I've done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've tried to be very honest and transparent about the mistakes. And not even mistakes, but honestly just bad decisions that I've made. Like not even mistakes, not even choices that were like, that was an accident. That was a bad, it was like, no, like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I did it anyway. And it ended up exactly, if not worse, than what you might think, But I think people need that. Also, in a sense, because people need to be able to do that. I think most people need to be able to talk about what they're going through. Like I know I need to be able to talk about what I'm going through. And I think in a lot of ways we're called to like share our testimony so that other people can share theirs, or start to have a better perspective on their testimony.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I first want to thank you so much for
no problem
being willing to come. You have to come back because we're not done.
1000%. We
are not done. I want to close basically by saying, I've been meaning to tell you this for a long time. I remember, because you mentioned like being empathetic and listening here. When we first met, like talked. It was with me, you, Simba, and Noel.
Yep.
The way you actually sat and listened to what I was saying and actually like heard, it was different. Like you heard and you listened. You embodied everything that you just said. That's why I know what you're saying is not just words. Like you really mean that because you did that for me, and I appreciate that. I want to tell you that for sure. And again, thank you so much for coming. You will absolutely be back. Because
I just want to say that yours is the best love that I've ever had. I just want to say that I think it's only fair that we get
what is the name of this podcast?
Dirty Doctrine.
Dirty Doctrine podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next time.
I just want to say that yours is the best love that I've ever had. I just want to say that I think it's only fair that we get